This road was known as the Ford Road, and I'm not sure if it still is, but basically behind us is Widnes, and if we continue along it we'll end up going through Speke and Egbert and into the city centre. On the right hand side is what used to be Ford's Halewood factory, which is now Jaguar Land Rover, although Ford's have now got a transmission plant on the site, so it does have a Ford badge on it again. On the left hand side is Speke. Construction of Halewood's Ford factory began in 1960 and the factory opened in 1963. In 1997, Ford's announced that the new Ford Focus, which would replace the Ford Escort, would be built in Germany and Spain. Ford's bought out Jaguar Land Rover, and in 2001 they produced the Jaguar X-Type here. Okay, so we're going to have a look at what the Ford plant looked like in the 1960s. So I've stolen some photographs from the internet. The first photograph is an aerial photograph taken by somebody who worked for the Liverpool Echo, and it shows the Ford plant in its surroundings in Halewood. This Ford Anglia was the first vehicle to be built at the Halewood plant. It can be seen at the Museum of Liverpool Life on Liverpool waterfront. And the final photograph from my haul of stolen goods is a photograph of the production line inside the Ford factory, and on the production line is a convoy of Ford Corsairs. I'm going to start this video in Hale, and there are reasons why, and I'll explain them when I get to the church. We've had some really odd weather in April this year. Sun comes out for a short while and you think to yourself it's going to be a nice day, and by the time you get to the location that you want to make a video of, it's clouded over and gone dull, and then sun comes out again. It's just, I don't know, it's just mixed up weather. This guy's John Middleton, the child of Hale, and he's looking at his old cottage further down the road. I did a video about Hale a couple of years ago now. Time flies, doesn't it? Wow. I'm going to have a walk to the church that you can see in the near distance, St Mary's Church. I'm going to set the camera up and have a little chat. You know, we all have our own memory lanes, things that we remember from our childhood, places that we grew up. And I guess if you've moved away and been away for quite some time, the memories become quite strong, and the places that we think about are held in a kind of time warp. We move on, but our memories of where we grew up or where we came from stay exactly the same as they were 50, 60 years ago. And the reality is that these places don't stay the same. They actually move on. And if you've not seen these places, the place where you grew up, the place where you were born, if you haven't seen it for a long time, and you go back, or someone shows you what it looks like now, it can be a little bit of a shock. It can actually harm the memories that you have, because a lot of places back in the 1940s, 50s, are probably not as built up as they are now. Things change, open spaces get sold off, and your memory of the place doesn't really gel with the reality of what places look like now. So we're going to have a look at Hailwood, and it's a place that's probably changed a lot since the 1940s, 50s and even the 60s, and it's a very different place now than it was then. But we're going to have a look at some of the nicer places. But I've started off in Hale because Hailwood, when you go back in history, was part of Hale, and I guess where Hale is on the coast of the River Mersey, Hailwood was probably the bud of the area, the tree-lined area. So I guess if you were around in those days, you would see some changes. But we're going to have a look at Hailwood. I'm not going to make a massive video about the place because there isn't that much that you can film, but there are some nice places, and by contrast there are some built up places as well. The first thing to do then is to drive from Hale to Hailwood, and we're going to take the scenic route. Now, apart from the vans which are parked around here doing little jobs for people who own the houses here, there's quite a few cars, as you can probably notice, and most of them are people who are going for a walk. They get out the cars, they've got a little bag put on the back, they pack lunch in, and they've got the walking stick things that help you when you're a hiker, and they take themselves off for a walk. So they're not people who live here, they're actually just day trip visitors. Quite a few visitors use the pub on the left hand side here, called the Child of Hale, as their rendezvous, or where they park. Leave the car in the car park, have the lunch at the pub either before they go or when they get back. The coastal walk along the Mersey is quite nice. It's highly recommended if you get a chance to go. This is Brook Lane, if you read the sign, and it's the road to Hailwood. But I'm going to cut this trip short and take ourselves to the end of the road where it meets Hailwood, and do the same journey again later in the video, because we've got something that we need to get into context. Just in front of us on the right hand side is what used to be the Horses Rest, an RSPCA establishment for ageing horses, and as you can see it's being turned into a new housing estate. This is the A562, and the cars travelling in the opposite direction are either going towards Widnes or heading for the M62 motorway. We're going to go straight through this roundabout, well, not literally, but we're going to take our first left turning into Old Hut Lane. But before we do that, let's have a look at what used to be in Old Hut Lane. Going back in time a few hundred years, this area was feuded over by at least two families, and one of them lived in what was described as a hut. Now it's spelt the German way, Hutte. I'm not sure why, but it means the same in English as it does in German. It was a hut or a wooden dwelling, and one of the families who became very prominent in this area lived on that land. Later on there was a house built which was moated. It was quite a very large house with a gatehouse, and that lasted until 1960 when Ford's Hailwood plant was built. It was demolished as the land was needed for the new factory. So these photographs, one dates from the early 1900s, and the second one is a little bit more recent, I think. Right, so with that done, we're back on the A562 Higher Road, and we're going to turn left into Old Hut Lane. Quite a nice road to drive along or walk along. I bet it was a little bit nicer back in the day. But at the bottom of the road, we're going to turn right, and we're going to drive along the outer boundary of Ford's factory, which is now Jaguar Land Rover, owned by an Indian company called Tata Motors. But as I said, Ford do have a transmission plant here now, and they build gearboxes, which is what transmission is, if you didn't know. So this is Tata Motors Jaguar Land Rover plant, and the building that you can see on the left hand side, which looks remarkably like a mushroom and is known locally as the mushroom, is a water tower. I'm going to drive to the end of the road so that you can see the factory on the left hand side, and when I get to the end of the road I'm going to turn round and drive back, but I'm not going to film that part of the journey. We'll resume the film on Higher Road where we turned off for Old Hut Lane. We're back on Higher Road, and this time, instead of turning left into Old Hut Lane, we're going to drive straight through and continue along Higher Road towards Hunts Cross. A few people have got in touch with me when I made the video about Hunts Cross and my primary school, Kingstone, and people who well, there was various people who replied who now live all over the place, but one or two live down Mackets Lane, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to drive down Mackets Lane because they've asked if they can see it again. So I hope it doesn't spoil your memories. But Mackets Lane's quite a nice road anyway, but it's possibly not the way you remember it. So I'm going to turn up the traffic lights and take a wander down Mackets Lane. Now the houses on the left here, I believe, had farmland behind them, and although there's still quite a bit of farmland in Halewood, that's actually gone now, and it's a housing estate. I think it was built back in the 60s because I had an aunt and uncle and 3 cousins who moved from Hale Road, which is basically the top of Smithdown Road, runs the back of Smithdown Road for a fair way. They moved here to New Maisonettes in the must have been the early 1960s, because me and my mum used to come and visit her sister, and that was probably built on the farmland that was behind. Well, it must have been, because there's no farmland behind it anymore. But they've been there for quite a number of years now. I think it was the early 60s when that estate was built, and other estates on this road behind the properties on the left. Okay, so we've turned on to Mackets Lane, and there is one interesting thing about Mackets Lane, in that George Harrison used to live on this road, but I'll come to that in a little minute. Mackets Lane shops on the right hand side were built in 1936. Changed hands a few times, I think. Now Mackets Lane, of course, was once the home of George Harrison. George Harrison, obviously one of the Beatles. His family moved here, I think it was 1962, and they lived in number 174. I'll give you a shout out if I can see which one it is. On the left hand side here, these railings are the end of Woolton Golf Course. On the right hand side, George Harrison's house. Someone's parked a yellow vehicle outside, looked like sightseers. It was the last house with the white wall on the front of the house. The white lines down the middle of Mackets Lane divide Woolton on the left from Hunt's Cross on the right hand side, so George actually lived in Hunt's Cross. Mackets Lane eventually changes name and will take you to Gattaca. If you saw my video about going to the old Gattaca Comprehensive School, this would have been an alternative route for me. Takes you down to Grange Lane, and it would have been possibly a quicker route for me as well, but didn't use it very often. So not too far, there's a roundabout which we're going to use to drive back into Halewood, and on that roundabout there's a pub, which used to be called the English Rose. And strangely, looking at Google Maps to do some of this video, it's still actually marked as the English Rose. It's not been the English Rose for a number of years. The pub was empty for a long time, and just before the pandemic in March 2020, the pub reopened as the Cookhouse. It's open now. I presume it's doing quite well, but it's no longer called the English Rose. Okay, so we've turned at the roundabout at the Cookhouse pub, and we're now on Lydiate Lane, and Lydiate Lane is going to take us into Hailwood Village. Now, when I was in the grounds of St Mary's Church in Hale, I said that Hailwood was once the wood of Hale, which indeed it was, but it also included Hale Bank, and we're going to head to Hale Bank once we've gone through Hailwood Village. Nobody really seems to know when Hailwood split from Hale. Some people say it was around about the 15th century, so 1400 and something, but there's no real proof of that. No one actually knows. But Hailwood lies between the course of the old Ditton Brook and Ramsbrook in the south, and disputes over the manor lands of Hailwood between two families, the Islands and the Hollands, began in the 13th century, and they were to be ongoing for some time, according to historians. So that roundabout we've just gone through, Lydiate Lane comes to an end and Church Road begins, and we're heading off to see St Nicholas's Church in Hailwood Village. Now, in my teens I had a friend who moved from West Derby with his family to Hale Bank, and I used to ride to his house on my push bike doing this exact same route that we're going to do today. Never really thought much of it back in the day, but it's a fair distance. One thing I found about Hailwood doing this video is there's nowhere to park. Even the church is sort of that tiny little car park. I mean, if you want to speak to God, you'd have to walk it or get the bus. So this is St Nicholas Church in Hailwood Village. It was built in 1839 as a chapel, and the building was greatly enlarged in 1847, and it became a parish church in 1868. The tower and the bells were added in around 1883. There's also a village school, which I don't think we can see, but it's just to the right of the church, and that was built in 1876. Okay, so back on the road, just passing the school on the left hand side. You can just get a quick glimpse of it. Just driving past the pub on the left hand side, the Eagle and Child. It's an old pub, it dates back to around about 1750. But there was another pub in Church Road called the Derby Arms, which is no longer here. Okay, right, so back to some history. Farming was the biggest occupation in Hailwood until recent modern times. Disputes over the manor lands of Hailwood between the Island and Holland families began as long ago as the 13th century and were ongoing for a couple of centuries at least after that. The Island family had Hale, most of Hale Bank and part of the north end of Hailwood, while the Holland family, who were seen as superior lords, controlled most of the north end and a portion of Hale Bank. However, the Hollands were based at a hall in Hale Bank, while the island's main residence was the hut in Hailwood, which we looked at earlier. At some point around about the 15th century, Hailwood was separated from Hale and became its own township, and in 1682 the manor of Hailwood became part of the dower of Charlotte, the Countess of Derby, which meant if you married the Countess of Derby, you got Hailwood as well. Between 1700 and 1847, around 2 million acres of waste or unused land where animals were grazed were what was termed enclosed. Basically, I think that means seized. Hailwood Green was the most affected, and the villagers lost their rights to graze the land at the side of the road and on the common as well. The common was given to the lords of the manor, the Derbys, the Earl of Derby, and the Island family, who had now become the Island Blackburn family. This seizure of land, which was termed enclosing, meant that the majority of the land which was enclosed at this time was split between Lord Derby and the Island Blackburn family. So these two men consolidated their holdings, their amount of land, and it brought them closer to their seats in Hailwood and the surrounding areas. The Island Blackburns added 100 acres to their holding, 10 of which were just small scattered allotments, while Lord Derby added 85. The rest of the land was split between the former strip field farmers, the field owners, and they got land which was loosely based on the location of the land they already possessed. It wasn't always that close to them, but Lord Derby and the Island Blackburn family got the best of the deal. One man named William Holland of the formerly very important Holland family, which I mentioned earlier, did indeed have 2 strips of land allotted to him close by to what he already owned. So perhaps it was something of his importance which still held some sway in the area. Holland's estates were in 2 areas, joined together by a convenient pathway. Right, so it's worth noting that Everton Football Club have their training facilities in Hailwood now, in Finch Lane, Finch Farm. I think we've passed it. I was going to shout out that we're at the road, but I couldn't see the actual sign. But I think we've just passed it on the main road before we turn left. As we've seen on this trip through Hailwood, there is still plenty of green space and farmland, some very nice looking farmhouse type buildings, especially on the left hand side. So Hailwood isn't completely built over. It still has a great deal of open space to offer. It's beginning to get a bit more built up now as we get near to the main road which runs through Hale Bank. my friend lived in a road just off this left turning here, so this is how far I used to cycle back in the day. Quite frightening to think about it now. I think I prefer driving these days. If I carry on driving, I'm going to end up in Widnes, and I don't want to do that, so at these traffic lights I'm going to do a U-turn and head back towards Hale. I've turned around and we're heading towards Ditton Bridge, which used to be Ditton Station, and we're heading now in the opposite direction we came before, and we're heading off to Hale. The Holland family, who I mentioned earlier, the family who feuded with the Island family, who lived in the hut, which has now been devoured by Ford's motor company. The Hollands would have had residence in Hale Bank. They were feuding over land in Hailwood, and I couldn't find out where they actually lived in Hale Bank. It just says they had residence here, but I just wanted to show you where Hale Bank was and what it looks like now, in case you've never been, or if you have been, what it looks like now. It's hard to imagine now that all this area used to be fields, farms, and farmland that families fought over. Before the 19th century, so talking 1700s, Hailwood was the largest township in the parish of Childwall. It was 3 miles long and 2 miles wide, and it covered 3,800 acres. Now, strangely, the northwest of the township came under the remit of Childwall Parish Church, whilst the southeast was within the boundary of Hale Church. This divide extended to other parts of Hailwood's history, as we'll see later. Now, we've seen Hale's parish church. I was talking from it there, St Mary's, and Childwall's parish church is going to feature in an upcoming video very soon. I've actually already filmed it, it just needs piecing together. So that will tie in with this. It should be up in the next week or so. Now, where we leave Hale Bank and enter Hale, I'm not quite sure, but I would guess it would be somewhere around about here, because there's a difference in the layout of the landscape. It becomes a little more greener as we get near to Hale and a little less built up. When you look back at the history of Hailwood, or the modern history of Hailwood, it's often described as having a role as an overspill area for post-war Liverpool. Families were moved from central parts of the city when low-quality houses were demolished. But at first the progress with this was slow. In the 1960s, parts of the former common were earmarked for housing development, although nothing was, at first, nothing was built. And I think that area was on Higher Road, between Higher Road and what would become the Ford factory. In the early 1960s, the first of two maisonettes, which were 3 and 4 story blocks of what has been described as flats, but a maisonette isn't really a flat. I'll tell you the difference. A flat is where there's a multi-story building, but each dwelling is on the same level. So if you own a flat, your living room, dining room, toilet, bedrooms and bathroom, kitchen are all on the same level, whereas a maisonette has stairs, so you would have a living room, say, and a kitchen on one level, and then you would go upstairs to bedrooms and a bathroom. So there is a difference between a maisonette and a flat. So some of the descriptions miss that pretty important thing out. A maisonette was always a little bit nicer than a flat. Anyway, so the first of two maisonettes, blocks of maisonettes, were built on Roseheath Drive and Torrington Drive. And this is what I mentioned earlier on. My aunt, uncle and 3 cousins moved into brand new maisonettes, and I sort of date that as being 1960 something. They moved from Hale Road. I remember going to see them with my mum in the maisonette. Inside it was very nice. Where they lived, it was very nice. The actual maisonettes though, even in the 1960s, had been there about, I don't know, a couple of months, and already they were sort of painted on. The lifts to each floor smelt of pea. Lovely place, but inside their actual house it was lovely. Now you may have noticed we're back on Brook Lane. I turned onto this at the beginning of the video and cut the journey short to start the video in Old Hut Lane. So this is Brook Lane. We're going to follow its course and we'll come out on Higher Lane near the Horses Rest, or the former Horses Rest, which is now a building site. You probably can't see because of the view that the camera gets is dashboard level, and I'm a little bit higher up. But if you look across the hedgerows here, these are just rolling fields, and you really don't get to see it from the main road. If you're just passing through Hailwood, you wouldn't even know this was here. But some lovely countryside. As time went on through the 60s and into the 70s, Hailwood developed into one of the 3 largest overspill areas for Liverpool. It went from an idyllic farming area into a bit of a concrete jungle in places. Okay, so we're back on Higher Road. In the opposite direction is Widnes, as I said earlier. And instead of driving straight through the roundabout this time, I'm going to make a right-hand turn, and we're going to drive through modern Halewood. Now on the right-hand side is a building site, and that used to be, until very recently, an RSPCA centre for horses, known locally as the Horses' Rest. But Hailwood is the home to the first warhorse grave to be awarded heritage protection. A horse called Blackie was a warhorse buried at the RSPCA Animal Centre here on this site in 1942. Blackie served with the 275th Brigade of the Royal Field Artillery, A Battery, the 55th West Lancashire Division in most of the major battles in the First World War, including Arras, the Somme Offensive and Ypres. Blackie's grave on this site is a Grade 2 listed monument. It was given that status in 2017. So a lot of people have mentioned it, and they're hoping that whatever building goes on here doesn't disturb Blackie's grave. On the left hand side we've just passed Hailwood Leisure Centre, which replaced the old Bridgefield Forum, which used to be on the site. Hailwood has a reasonably new railway station which opened in 1988. There was an earlier one which closed in 1951. I think it opened in 1874, and it was high up on an embankment. It was also made of wood, and we're just about to pass under this 3-arch sandstone viaduct which was part of the railway line. I'm going to take the turning on the left, which takes us past the Eagle and Child pub and St Nicholas's Church. If I was to carry on and turn right, we would head back towards Hale. That's the road we took earlier. I mentioned earlier that Hailwood has been used as an overspill area. And just to give you an idea, in the 1950s, just over 6,000 people lived here. By the end of the 1960s, that total was 19,000. That's a lot of people migrating to one pretty small area. The last census shows that there's 29,200 people living in Hailwood. So this just shows you the growth that this area has gone through in a pretty short space of time when you consider its long history. Right, so that's pretty much it for this video. There's a lot of things I've missed out regarding Hailwood, even though this video is a lot longer than I first thought it would be. Back in the church I said it'll be a short video, there's not much to see. Something like an hour later we're still missing things out. I can't include everything, but I hope you've enjoyed the trip around Hailwood and Hale. At the end of this video there's going to be a special request from somebody who used to live in Hailwood, and the sequence that I've filmed for him is at the end of this video. If you want to watch it, you're welcome to do so. If you don't, I'm going to finish this video at the old English Rose pub, which is now called the Cookhouse, and that's back on Mackets Lane, the border between Hunts Cross and Woolton. Okay, so thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. probably at Childwall Church. Well, we're back in Halewood, and this short sequence is a request from someone who sent me a message and said that if I ever filmed Halewood, would I include the house and the road that this person used to live in. And by sheer coincidence, I sent a message back and told him that I'd already started filming in Halewood. So this is a little trip out to somebody's former home. From what I gather, his family bought this house when it was brand new in the late 1970s, and they lived here for a short time and then moved on, and apparently regretted moving. And I'm going to guess that this person hasn't seen the house or Halewood since leaving in the early to mid 1980s. So it may have changed a little bit in that time. So I've got an idea of where this road is. I don't know exactly where the house is, but I've got an idea of where the road is. Oops, wrong road. Hope no one watches me reversing out onto a main road. Anyway, I thought that was the one. Right, this is the one. I turned one too soon. Now, which way would his house be? I'm going to turn left. No, gone the wrong way, numbers are wrong. This is why I've never been an Amazon delivery driver. If there's two ways to go, I usually choose the wrong one. So we're going to have to turn around and head the other way. Right, and there it is. Number on the bin, I guess, gives it away. Hope that's the right one. Wouldn't be too bad if you couldn't see this house from the road. So I've actually passed it, took no notice of it, turned into the road and then gone the wrong way. Brilliant. Oh well, that's my Amazon career down the pan. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane, and we'll catch up soon.